Everything, camp, mining claims, equipment, etc. He wants 15 million, I guess. We are unable to pay for it. It was intended to be gold for Parker Schnabel. Instead, he might have discovered something that had been hidden for tens of thousands of years, and it wasn't treasure. Camera footage from Gold Rush, Season 15, showed more than just frozen ground and damaged equipment. Parker was startled by a horrifying finding that they documented. What began as a competition for millions of dollars in gold devolved into a terrifying journey into the unknown. The cut that should never have been made. There is no whispering among the Klondike. It lets forth a scream. The country is harsh, old, and full of creatures that are best left alone. He believed he was the best person to know that. He had been tearing into frozen earth for almost 10 years, pursuing gold with the accuracy of a wolf-hungry tactician. However, there was something different hidden beneath the ice this season, and it sent shockwaves through the mining world when it forcefully and unintentionally surfaced. It's obvious before we get into this that what he discovered under the ice was never supposed to be discovered. You will be rendered dumbfounded by more than just this. This was no typical season. It was the 15th. They all believed that he had the potential to set records, change his legacy, and revolutionize gold mining in general. However, what they discovered there was dull. It was not glistening, it returned the stare. This area has some excellent drilling. In actuality, there are also a lot of awful ones. We just need to be spot on because you lose money if you place the pit in the wrong place on this type of ground. He had great expectations in the first few weeks of the season. The Wolf, a chilly 4-acre cut, was a promising spot that he managed to acquire. The pay soil was buried deep. It would require sheer strength, timing, and hundreds of tons of overburden cleared to reach it. He didn't flinch though. He had a strategy. He had his team. He knew his numbers. They were searching for gold valued at least $1 million. However, the ground started to turn against the excavators as they delved farther. It wasn't your average muddy collapse or flood panic. Something older, something out of the ordinary. The permafrost broke first, followed by the water table rising and the odor. It was a harsh, metallic, strange smell, not one that belongs in the 21st century or in dirt. The entire team then stopped breathing as an excavator tore through a particularly frozen layer. They hit bone instead of gold because of this. Not just any bone either. Curved, extended, smooth, solid, frozen, yet distinctly biological. When he arrived on the scene, he gaped in disbelief. One person whispered, "Is that a tree?" "It's a freaking tusk," another person remarked. "Mammoth," he said clearly. However, something seemed off even as he uttered the term. It was too symmetrical, too large, and too well preserved. "Is that a very old tree?" "Dude, it's a fucking tusk. Tusk of a mammoth. It's a fantastic device." The tusk was only the start. They discovered more embedded in ice beneath it. A large jaw with teeth worn in a manner that is inappropriate for a woolly mammoth. What paleontologists would later refer to as one of the most complete Ice Age predator remains ever discovered in the Yukon, was embedded in that frozen wall, fully sealed by layers of silt and time. However, it was not the creature's size, or even its flawless preservation that startled him, and would later garner international attention. It had been lodged in its cranium. It was buried with a man-made, polished, implanted, non-lodged sphere. They initially believed it to be a rock. The artifact was smooth, black, and chilly to the touch, even when wearing gloves, but it might have been a piece of ice-weathered metal. Under pressure, they are often stable. It was the first time in years that he appeared uneasy. Whispering, "This doesn't belong here," he said. The spherical resembled a grapefruit in size. Days later, laser scans revealed etching along its equator, resembling a crude marking or code. It wasn't primitive though. It was too neat, too accurate. It's not the type of thing nature produces. Something that science is unable to explain. Not yet anyhow. He kept the find hidden in a safe crate back at camp under strict concealment. He was not looking for attention. An amazing and surprising discovery has been made by a gold miner in northwest Canada. A mammoth believed to be over 30,000 years old was mummified. However, news always spreads. By the end of the week, the mining camp was filled with rumors. Something ancient or perhaps not, a relic or a hidden danger. The government visit followed. Unannounced are 2 males, not from the Yukon. Just briefcases and questions, no names. Gold yields did not interest them. Coordinates were what they sought. The tusk was what they desired. They wanted the sphere above anything else. He wouldn't part with it. "This is what we found," he stated. "We're not giving anything away." However, that's when the strangeness began. The video vanished. They erased the GoPro that had recorded the unearthing. It ruined the drone feed. The backup files are no longer there. The photographs belonged to him alone. However, even he no longer felt secure. The generator failed that evening. The site's lights flashed off. He claimed to have felt watched as he made his way back to his trailer. The following day, he informed Mitch. There was something out there. Something, not a person. The entire team was discussing it at the end of the week. The discomfort, the cold areas, the digging tools breaking down every time they got close to the sphere's final resting place. One of the excavators just wouldn't start. A crew member was burned and sent to the hospital after a fuel line exploded. The room that ought to have remained underneath. Weird has seen Parker Schnabel before. He has discovered several odd items throughout his more than 10 years of mining. Frozen fossils, old artifacts, and rusting implements. He had seen bones that matched no living animal, tusks the size of tree trunks. However, things were different in the second chamber. That was incorrect. Their discovery of a depression beneath the ice was too ideal. That's not how nature makes circles. The smooth carved walls, the unfamiliar and repetitious glyphs, appear to be unlike anything he has ever seen, and no archaeologist he contacted could identify them. According to one researcher, they don't correspond with any indigenous language. They're too flawless to be ancient, yet they're not modern either, and he was most frightened by that. You see, the black sphere, the artifact they discovered, appeared to belong on that pedestal. It was precisely the right size. At the base, there was even a slight indentation, as if something had been there for centuries or more. Here's the catch, though. The pedestal was intended for more than merely supporting objects. It appeared to have been designed to power it. The base was encircled by metal rods that were neither rusty nor decaying. Additionally, sensors detected weak electromagnetic fields that were still active beneath the building. Yes, exactly. Whatever had been done in this chamber was not finished. He wanted to fill it out and get on with his group. Quick, no payoff, no riches, just strange vibes and time wasted. However, he kept thinking about it. He had more dreams about the symbols the more he studied them. Pressure in his skull, literally nights of swirling patterns, and something else. Not words, not whispers, just a voice that watches, listens, and waits. He must descend further, doesn't he? Yes, but Parker, this finish must go that way. Roughly a foot. It must go down since the screen deck is in the way. Thus it cannot. Then the headache began. Not only him. Every time they approached the site, half of the crew reported experiencing light sensitivity, migraines, and nausea. Equipment continued to malfunction. Static sputtered from radios. GPS information would disappear on its own. On one occasion, the onboard computer of a bulldozer showed erroneous coordinates, numbers well beyond any system of global mapping, as if something were being marked off world. But he remained. The Earth then shifted one night. Not a cave-in, not a collapse, a heartbeat. For less than 3 seconds, ground sensors were illuminated. Straight out of the chamber location, a powerful seismic energy wave exploded. It wasn't organic. The weather wasn't the cause. There was no way to describe it. The Klondike mining camp was transformed into a circus in a matter of hours. Their trucks did not appear. Government license plates, unremarkable personnel, spotless boots, no badges displayed, no questions answered. On the grounds of geological instability, they wanted access to his private cut. But he was wiser. Mitch did the same. The rest of the crew did the same. Safety wasn't the aim here. It has to do with control. The artifact was what they want. However, days earlier, he had concealed it behind the fuel depot, buried it beneath outdated machinery, coated it in lead, and secured it inside a freight container that had been decommissioned. They would have to work for it if they were going to accept it. But the warnings continued. The old reports began to surface at that point. Archives contain historical information. Late 19th century letters. Vanishing miners in the Klondike. Entire crews vanished into thin air. Strange lights are mentioned in diaries. Things uncovered that should have stayed in the depths and voices in the snow. The area close to his dig had been explored by several explorers in the past, although the records were not always reliable. Not all of the maps matched. This gold run was a very rich creek, and I assume that this is where it emptied into Dominion. Features of the entire terrain had changed. Where there had been dry land, lakes had emerged. The sole dependable landmark. Things grew stranger the deeper his group dug. Wildlife stayed away from the area. Overhead birds ceased to fly. At night, the closest town reported seeing lights that resembled roars. The sky, however, was clear. The locals began to whisper once more. The Klondike is waking up. an elder informed him. But he wasn't going to back down. And you're digging into its heart. He wanted to know what was under there, whether it was gold or not. The crew began to see stuff at that point. Fast-moving shadows just beyond the floodlights. They turned around and saw people who weren't there, equipment that moves by itself. Normally quiet, the camp dog began growling at precisely 2:23 a.m. every night. The cries followed. That wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough to keep the site closed for one night. He had gone too far, seen too much, dug too deep. The last excavation followed. He sent in a full crew of contractors, larger drills, and heavier machinery in an effort to recover costs after feeling pressured by the investors. It was an easy strategy. Shatter the chamber's far wall to reveal what's inside. There were no microphones used to produce the sound. It did not go near the ears. Like a lost song from before people ever stood up, it struck the bones deep and low. Parker knew they had not discovered gold as he stood at the threshold. It was the door that should never have opened. The following night nobody slept. Not one member of the crew, not even Parker. The chamber was no longer merely an exception. It was in motion. They smashed open the second wall, and the humming grew louder. Now it was like an unseen drum beat pulsing through their ribs. GPS maps fell blank. Compass needles twisted. Electromagnetic measurements soared. And something answered someplace deep within the ground. At the brink of the breach, he stood. The dense, unnatural darkness that now oozed out the aperture was hardly broken by floodlights. Silently, "This isn't a mine anymore," he declared. The realization struck hard since miners are familiar with the ground. It's something else. It is where they reside. Go through it, pay attention to it. However, this earth, this location, was responding with a hostile tone. The building behind the wall was larger than anyone could have imagined. Not metal, yet metal-like. Rather than reflecting light, the walls absorbed it. No fasteners, no seams, and no erosion. Just geometrically flawless angles, created by something that has no idea of human limitations. It appeared to be a bunker to some, a vault to others. Even though he was unable to speak the truth out loud, he was aware of it. It appeared to be a grave. Drones were attempted but unsuccessful. As soon as the camera stepped beyond the threshold, the signal was lost. The batteries died right away. He had one of the technicians drop a heat probe into a lead line case that had been jury-rigged. They were chilled by what they returned. Nothing they could see in real time was caught in one of the digital audio logs taken just before the hack. First static, then a crisp crackling sound. A distorted, echoing, impossible voice could be heard beneath it. He did not entertain the crew. The panic wasn't necessary for him. However, he returned to the breach's edge late that evening. By themselves. He had no idea what he was looking for. A falsehood, perhaps. Perhaps nothing. Instead, what he saw stopped him cold. The room was bright. From the far wall flashed a faint blue brightness. Like light through mist, symbols emerged, floating and projecting into the air. They moved, reorganized, created a pattern, and then came to a halt. Later, the geologists on the crew matched them to a periodic table, but no known elements were found to match. There was a single, flashing sign that matched nothing that had ever been cataloged. She stated, "It's not just unknown, it's not from here." The water in the camp turned black 2 days later. There was contamination in the tanks that were filled from the neighboring melt, neither with silt nor with oil, but with an unidentified mineral compound. Filtering was ineffective. It got worse when it boiled. It had the smell of charred metal. This season has been emotionally charged. We had to make some really important choices. I was apprehensive about purchasing Dominion, but it appears that this investment was worthwhile. Members of the crew had nosebleeds, hallucinations, and rashes. A man fell. He woke up, spoke for 3 continuous minutes in a language no one understood, and then fainted once more. He was confronted with Whitehorse. No diagnosis. He had no recollection. He still wouldn't shut it down. His investors were constantly phoning. Government representatives began knocking once more. And they weren't requesting permission this time. He had never seen legal orders, military canisters, or helicopters before. They claimed you would leave the location, but he refused to back down. "It is not yours." "Yes, we do." The threat began at that point, to his staff, not to his face. At night, phones started ringing. But he remained strong. "The chamber belongs to the earth," one remarked, "and you are guests." In private, however, he decided to enter. Not merely scrounge, scan, or sample to get in. He ventured into the unknown with Mitch, 2 spotlights, and a handheld recorder. It was still shining, but now weak and colder than anticipated. As they went deeper, the symbols became less visible. The walls seemed softer in some way, but abnormally smooth, like obsidian. As they descended into the darkness, they formed a spiral ramp by curving in on themselves. His recorder sounded for 27 minutes, then it stopped. Just stillness, no light, no signal. Something had changed by the time they got back a few hours later. He was silent for 2 days. It didn't bother him, wasn't prepared, ate very little, simply sat in his trailer, staring at the relic they had concealed in the lead box, as if it were about to speak. Mitch only stated this when he eventually broke the silence. It was never intended to be found, and it's not from here. The black sphere, the artifact, had undergone a transformation. It was throbbing in sync with the buzzing emanating from the room, and now gleamed dimly, as if it were awake. He then issued an order for a complete lockdown. No more exploration, no more digging. The gold could wait. Treasure was no longer the focus of this. It was a matter of survival. Because after they descended, the situation at the site took an unexpected turn. Under the Klondike, the awakening. It was too late to stop the news from spreading by the time it did. Pictures of the dark sphere, the glyph code room, and Parker's descent were released on a small blog maintained by a former crew member. Those pictures became viral in a day. Forums for mining exploded. It was referred to as the Yukon Beacon by conspiracy channels. It was otherworldly, some said. Some claimed it was old human technology from a vanished society. Some thought it was worse than that, something completely unsuitable for human interaction. However, Parker remained silent. He was unable to. Men were no longer the only ones watching him. Everything changed after the leak. Unmarked military trucks appeared. The region lost satellite coverage. False terrain overlays were used in place of, or removed from official maps of the location. Aircraft were diverted. The area was blocked off by Google Earth, and Parker's mining claim was immediately canceled. No notice, no trial, no documentation. They told him to go. He didn't. Rather, he intensified his efforts, used every available resource, spent $500,000 in a week, paid staff underhandedly, purchased cold weather clothing, sealed communications, satellite uplinks, and lead shielding. Since he was now aware of the reality, a transmitter was the relic, nor merely passive, nor merely antiquated. Something was being sent. The messages were brief and erratic at first. After then, they started to create patterns. A cryptographer was employed by Parker. Within 3 days, trembling and unresponsive, he departed. "Language isn't it," he muttered. "It's a set of instructions." What are the instructions for? The pulses became more intense, but no one knew. Miners at neighboring claims experienced similar hallucinations and nightmares within a week, dreaming about the same numbers, seeing the same shapes in the mud. According to one man, his dog started communicating with him in code. He was serious. He had a written record of it. Water and feed rate were changed. Although it was a lot of fun, it was challenging since you were dealing with open ocean and wide open material. Another claimed that he had a dream in which he saw Parker grinning and standing inside a luminous sphere with black eyes. Parker continued without stopping. Now that he thought the sphere was more than just active, he was unable to. It had intelligence. It served a function. He had been selected by it. However, that wasn't the most terrifying aspect. The discovery of the second sphere was the scariest part. By Tony Beats, not Parker. Only 30 meters away. The same. Buried deeper than anyone had ever excavated before, under an ancient channel. It didn't hum when it was accidentally discovered during a standard cut expansion. Not quite yet. However, it was warm. It's too hot. It was waiting, too. The patterns became clear at that point. A circuit, 2 chambers, 2 spheres, and 2 sites. The figures were calculated by Parker's geologist. If the 2 relics were related, as she thought they were, then something was being turned on. A system that might be worldwide and possibly older than history. Then there was no more hum. Quiet. The site became silent for the first time in weeks. There was silence, no tremor, no heartbeat. Members of the crew rejoiced. Others packed and went. Parker, however, was wiser. Because safety does not equate to silence. To be silent is to listen. And he knew something had heard them as the sky above the Yukon horizon became blood crimson. It started off as a deep rumbling that flowed across the hills and caused the trees to sway even in the absence of wind. It wasn't underground above like thunder, but rather stretched and pulled like taffy. Phones ceased to function. The compass needles whirled once more. Did Parker Schnabel unintentionally cause a worldwide occurrence that scientists are unable to explain? Or was he involved in something much more deliberate? Is this the start of a reckoning or a revelation? Please share your beliefs with us. For more, remember to like and subscribe.